I was interested in this game the moment I saw the announcement trailer. Although initially, as far as I'm aware, it was only released for Steam and I wasn't really much into PC gaming overall, but it did eventually come out on the PS3, PS4 and PS Vita, and so I managed to get Rogue Legacy. Now, this is a rather strange game, and the main marketing point of this game is something that I think that's rather overplayed and doesn't really make much of a big deal. It's more of a novelty more than anything. The story behind this game is that you play as a long ancestry of knights. So you play as one character, and then when you die, you will play as your son or daughter to try to continue on. And basically this is sort of like a roguelike, although some people would say roguelite because the definitions of words that are used to describe roguelikes, this doesn't exactly fit them, but whatever, you can call it what you want, it doesn't really matter. But the game is set out in this randomly generated dungeon. It's sort of like a Metroidvania style dungeon where you do go left, right and jump like a platform game, but it's randomly generated, so you'll have all these rooms that connect in a set variety of ways and it'll randomly assign different arrangements for those rooms. Of course, you do have certain set room types. It's not completely random with stuff just scattered everywhere, but you'll have certain room types such as the challenge rooms where you have to do a certain challenge in order to unlock a particular type of item. And so you've got your very basic running, jumping, attacking, downwards attacking and all that sort of stuff. But you also have other types of abilities, such as your secondary weapon, which can be something like a giant sword that will just appear in front of you and kind of act as a shield, or a spinning blade that will shoot out and will come back to you, or the scythes which will sort of arc around, or fire shield. There's all sorts of different types, and when you do die, what happens is you will keep the money that you have collected and you will be able to spend that money on upgrading your castle, and your castle is basically your stats and abilities. So like passive stats, and you will unlock different job classes and all of that lot. After that you will choose one of 3 new characters, and each character will have their own traits. So for example, you may have a character who's colorblind, so you don't see color as that character, or you may have one who has vertigo where everything is upside down, or they might have tunnel vision, so everything beyond a certain radius from your character is blurred. And most of these are just a novelty. Most of them don't really affect the game at all, they're just there for silliness, and the game really overplays this, I think, so I don't think it really matters all that much. Apart from vertigo, I hate vertigo, it's awful. But also they will have assigned to them different job classes that will have their own unique ability, like a dash forward or a higher increased rate of money drops and different types like that. And they'll have a certain type of weapon as well as a secondary weapon, and these are randomly generated, so the idea is that you can't just stick to one and say yes I like this one. You will have to pick and choose, and sometimes you'll have to choose the one that you're not necessarily so familiar with, but you will have to kind of get used to it. Now the dungeon itself is randomly generated, but it is all set up in a strict fashion in that you'll always have the main castle in the centre, then you'll always have the gardens to the right, and like the top of the tower at the top, and then you'll have like the dark depths below at the bottom. And your main goal is to defeat all of the bosses, which you can do them in any order, but of course there is a suggested order based on the strength of the different types of enemies. Now you don't get experience leveling up, you just get money, and your level is determined by how much stuff you've bought. And once you've completed the main bosses, you will unlock their super form, so there will be an extra version of that boss who is an absolute nightmare, and this is part of the game that I'm really not that keen on. I don't like the super bosses because it doesn't tie into the RPG element of it at all. You can't grind or gain abilities to get better at these bosses. You just have to keep trying them over and over and over and over again because they're all very strict. It will be that you will have this very specific arena with a very specific amount of health, with a very specific character, with very specific abilities, and if you can't beat it, then you don't lose anything, you just walk back outside the entrance of the boss. that is for the super bosses, not for the regular bosses. And they are so very hard. I really don't like them, and I just don't like that format. So them doing that for super bosses is not something that I am a huge fan of. But yeah, there's all these different types of variables to take into consideration. Another example of this would be the different types of equipment. So for example, there is the vampire set where attacking will heal you, and this varies from different like helmets and swords and stuff, and you're basically just choosing different modifiers. That's basically what the equipment is. And so for example, if you equip the gold variation of everything, then you will get the most money intake and all that. But yeah, I really did have a lot of fun with this game. But yeah, I just don't like the super bosses. That's my biggest complaint about this game. I saw the trailers for this game and it sounded like something that I would really like, and when I did eventually play this game, it turned out that it was something that I really liked. And one of the things that I really liked about it that I saw from the trailer was the HUD, the display. I saw that there was a lot of information there, and it seemed to do this whole long-term think about things in the long run rather than just in the short run aspect of things that I really liked. And so when I did have all that store credit for CEX that I had, one of the games I bought was The Witch and the 100 Knight. Now, you play as the 100 Knight, which is this little character that doesn't properly speak, and the witch is commanding you to spread her swamp across the entire world because she wants to take over the world with her swamp. And what I love about this game is the amount of layers that it takes to just play this game and the amount of different layers to the leveling system. So basically, you enter a stage and you have the typical leveling system that you would expect. You kill enemies, you get experience, you level up, your stats increase. Your experience doesn't actually get accounted for until you leave the area. So you can't level up whilst in the level in the area, so to speak. And you walk around and you find these different points in which you can spread the swamp. And these are basically like your checkpoints throughout each of the levels. You can use these checkpoints, as I'm just going to call them, to spend your grade, and grade or grade point or whatever is sort of like an individual leveling system within each playthrough of the level. So you want to enter a level and you want to be able to get out of the level so you can cash in your experience, but you also want to be able to stay in the level so that you can accumulate grades and spend these grade points on upgrades so that you are more powerful during that run of the level. So it's beneficial for you to grind, so to speak, inside any given level rather than just doing a small thing and then repeating that small thing over and over again. It encourages this wider range of activities. Within each level you also have gigacalories, and this is sort of like your energy, and if your gigacalories run out, it affects your health, and so you're basically going to die. And so you start with like 100%, and as you move around, and depending on whether you'll do running attacks or if you're just walking normally, or just depending on how you act in certain situations will affect how quickly your gigacalories drain. And so you want to keep them up. And recovering gigacalories is one of those things that you can spend your grade points on. And so there's this balancing between collecting the experience for your overall level and collecting your grade for the ability to increase your combat prowess whilst in the level, but by doing that for a long time you risk yourself running out of gigacalories, and of course you don't want to die whilst you're in the level after having spent a long time there, because then you've got a lot more to lose. It's this risk-reward balance, and I just really like it. And so I like to see games, and NIS, the company, Nipponichi Software, is very good at doing this exact type of thing, where they'll encourage a form of grinding that doesn't encourage you to just do one thing and repeat that one thing over and over and over again. It requires more of a long form thinking aspect to it, which is the exact opposite of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, for example. And I really like that. But there are also these different layers to your attack as well, because as you equip items, you equip them in a set order, and that means that when you attack, you will attack with those weapons in that combination, in that set order. And so you want to sort of build up a combo in such a way that it will be more effective against a different type of enemies, because the later attacks in the combo have a higher multiplier, but also each weapon has a randomized digit assigned to it, so it'll be between 1 and 5, and if you can get a string of weapons with those digits that all run in a line, so say if it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which would be the best, then that adds even more power to that. And even the items themselves, you can't just pick up an item and use it, because you pick up an item and it goes into your stomach area, and your stomach is sort of like the temporary placeholder for the items that you are going to claim for when you leave the area. And there's also this whole thing about eating enemies, which will allow you to kill them easier, but by doing that you're trading off part of your stomach capacity. Just the amount of layers and things that are like piled up on top of each other when they take such a simple concept of you run around and you hit things and add all these layers to it. I just love it. And I've seen like IGN's review, and I see this so often where they'll review something. I'm not targeting IGN specifically here, but just reviewers will review something and they'll see something like the gigacalorie counter, and they'll see that as it's pointless busy work. You're just given limitations. There's no need for it. But they are ignoring the core purpose as to why these things exist and to how it all melts together to create this just fantastic game experience of being strategic and thinking about comparing the value of something long term versus something short term, and the value of taking certain risks. And I think there's just a certain category of people who just don't get it, who want to play these games where you die and you appear right where you died and you don't have to worry about carrying more than 2 weapons at once. But I am certainly not one of those people. I love all this inventory management and all that. I absolutely love it. This is a game that my brother hounded me to play. He kept saying to me over and over again, "Have you played it yet? Have you played it yet?" And my answer was no. In fact, I don't even think I had it, because I remember I got it with some money I had lying around in PayPal, because I had sold a few copies of my album, The Eclectic Duck. And this isn't a plug for The Eclectic Duck, but I'm just saying that this is what I did, and this was my mentality at the time. So I think it was around the end of 2012 or maybe the start of 2013, around that time, that I played this game. And this game is Before the Echo, and what's interesting is that this game wasn't originally called Before the Echo, it was originally called Sequence. But I remember later on telling my friend Holly about this, and she was saying that she got it and she was playing it, and by the way, it's called Before the Echo now. And so I have managed to help myself call it Before the Echo. My brother still calls it Sequence though. But yeah, I'm used to calling it Before the Echo now. So basically a prequel to There Came an Echo is the way that they're framing it now, even though it's a completely different game. But this game gets a lot of attention for how unusual it is, and it is rather unusual. You don't see many games that follow this formula, but I think regardless of that, it is just a very good game. I tend to find that games get praised for originality and just things being unusual, and I think that in itself isn't necessarily a point of praise, but it just so happened that it was a very good game. That is what I would praise it for. So, it's an RPG rhythm game, and you don't get many of those. That's what I mean by original. And battles take place on these separate, what you could call DDR boards. Like if you imagine Dance Dance Revolution with the arrows flying upwards, it's that kind of thing. And the way that battles work is that you have to survive the round by doing 2 things. 1, the song can't end. If the song ends, then you lose the round, or if you run out of health, then you also lose the round. You have these 3 different boards that you can switch between, and the arrows will move across the screen as they do in a DDR game, and depending on what panel you're on, matching those arrows will grant different effects. The main one is the defense board, and if an arrow passes through that, then you get damage, that the enemy hits you basically, and there's different types of arrows of different colours that represent different strength attacks. The blue board will allow you to accumulate mana, and you need mana to cast your spells. You have this wheel at the bottom of the screen, and you can use that to select different magic attacks. So it might be one where you're healing, or one where you're putting up a barrier to guard against the arrows on the red panel, or it might just be an attack, or all sorts of variations of affecting the battle in some way or other. And the more that you play the game, the more ability slots that you will unlock. Casting a spell means that the spell will take some time to recharge, and once you've cast a spell, you will have to move over to the green panel and match up the arrows in order to effectively cast the spell. That's how you do your attacks. Now, when you defeat an enemy, you will gain some experience, and you will have 3 items that you can get, and each item has a percentage probability of you getting it. And the game is entirely about fighting these enemies. There's no walking around an area and exploring or anything like that. You have 3 enemies per floor, and you choose an enemy to fight and you'll fight them. But the aim of the game is to collect these different materials from different things that they drop, and you can combine them to make a key that will allow you to progress to the next floor. So sometimes you'll have to fight an enemy over and over again in order to get the appropriate items, or sometimes it might just take 1 or 2 tries. And in between each of these floors you will have the guardians, which are like your bosses, and they will have their own unique ability which will affect the board in some way. So it might cause the arrows to fade out, or it may cause the buttons to be reversed, or something like that. And you can also craft items that will allow you to block out these effects from the monsters on the floor that they represent. Now, learning spells and crafting items costs experience, and that means that in this game you can level down just as much as you can level up. And so you choose the component of the item that you want to make, and you choose an amount of experience that you want to spend on it. And the more experience that you spend is affecting the amount of success rate that the crafting thing will work. So if you put in loads of experience, it will have a 95% chance, or if you put a very small amount in, it might have a 20% chance. But you don't lose the items if you fail it, you just lose the experience. So you can level up and level down all the time. So you're constantly leveling up so that you can then not have to lose as many levels when you're crafting these items. And in order to learn spells, you have to choose to learn it, and then you are given a challenge. It costs experience to have a go at the challenge. You complete the challenge, you get the spell. But of course, each attempt costs experience, so you might think, I don't want that, it's too risky. I remember one of the later game spells I just did not try to get because I thought that's far too much experience that I am not willing to risk. And I just really like it. I like the whole risk element and the drop rate of these different enemies and stuff, and the constant leveling up and leveling down. It's really nice, and I'm glad that I did actually play it.